Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the United States Navy Memorial and Memorial Visitor Center. Today we honor all Americans who are former prisoners of war, service members and civilians still unaccounted for, and their families, all of whom have made extraordinary sacrifices for our country. Today we will honor those who have been prisoners of war or who were missing in action by placing a wreath at the lone sailor statue. Our host for today's ceremony is Captain Graham Dix, United States Navy, Chief of Staff, Naval District, Washington. Accompanying Captain Dix are our guests of honor, Commander Everett Alvarez, United States Navy, retired, and Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness Gil Cisneros, and Rear Admiral Frank Thorpe, U.S. Navy retired, President and Chief Executive Officer, United States Navy Memorial Foundation. Guests, please rise for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the presentation of colors, our national anthem, and the invocation. Advance the colors. Host the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain David Stroud, Chaplain Corps, United States Navy, will now offer the invocation.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we pause this afternoon and gather in this special place to honor our nation's prisoners of war and those who remain missing in action. We thank you for these men and women who have given so much for us and our liberty. We thank you for their families and the sacrifices they have made on our behalf. We thank you for our great nation that has a proud tradition of maintaining faith with those who wear her cloth. As we begin this ceremony, we ask that your presence would be here with us. We ask that you would bless us with your hand of strength and comfort. Bless those whose loved ones remain missing in action. Give them hope each day to know that while their loved ones are missing to us, they are known to you, and you promise to provide in all circumstances. Bless those who have returned home from their captivity. May the strength that got them through their time of detention be a daily hope to them and a guiding light for us. May all that we say and do here this afternoon honor each of them and encourage us to be citizens willing to sacrifice for the good of all. We ask all this in your holy name. Amen.
Guests, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Rear Admiral Frank Thorpe, U.S. Navy retired, President and Chief Executive Officer of the United States Navy Memorial Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome to the United States Navy Memorial for the 2022 POW MIA Remembrance Day Wreath-Laying. Chaplain Stroud, thank you for that invocation. You set a perfect tone for today's event. Thank you very much. Captain Dix, thank you for hosting us today. Thank you for bringing this event to life today. I'd like to welcome the many distinguished guests here, including numerous guests of our colleagues of our guests of honor, including their spouses. We all know the Navy family is so important. Tammy and Jackie, it's great to have you all here today. Thank you very much. I also want to welcome to today's event several senior officers representing our friends and allied nations. Thank you for joining us today as we continue to stand side by side every day. To all of those present today, I hope you're able to join us for some light refreshments in the Visitor Center after the event. And to those watching online, thank you. Thank you for spending your time on what our military, our nation, holds so sacred. This National Day of Remembrance and that POW MIA flag that flies over the Navy Memorial 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, are designed to keep these Americans that we talk about today in front of our minds all of the time. We are honored today to be joined for this wreath-laying by two incredible leaders who have personal experience in the area of POWs and MIAs. Bookends, if you will. A POW who was in captivity in Vietnam for 3,113 days. And the Department of Defense leader who today sets policy for our men and women serving in the future. But before I introduce our guests of honor this afternoon, I'd like you to focus on that number, 3,113 days, the number of days Commander Alvarez was in captivity. I ask you to think of what you were doing in March of 2014. March 3rd, 2014 to be exact, more than 8 years ago. And I ask you to think of all of the experiences, all of the events all of the celebrations and the vacations and the promotions and all of the memories that you have had since March 3rd, 2014, 313 days ago today. Now I ask you to think for a moment, if you didn't have those memories because you were locked up and tortured in a prisoner of war cell, not knowing when or if you were coming home. That's a pretty stark thought. And that is what Commander Ev Alvarez missed. All of those experiences that we remember. So with that as a foundation, I would like to introduce our first guest speaker. Undersecretary Gil Cisneros is a citizen committed to service, a former Navy sailor who earned a commission as a naval officer, a former congressman representing California's 39th Congressional District, where he was a true advocate and a champion for the men and women who serve in the military. And now, the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, Mr. Cisneros has many options for how to spend his time and his resources. And he has made the personal commitment to spend those time and resources to make our nation stronger. Not only is Mr. Cisneros responsible for the Department of Defense's POW MIA policies, he's responsible for force readiness, for force management, for health affairs, for the National Guard and Reserve Component affairs, education and training, and the military and civilian personnel requirements and management, including equal opportunity, morale, welfare, recreation, and quality of life matters. A pretty impressive portfolio. We are so fortunate that today, Honorable Gil Cisneros, the recipient of the 2019 Navy Memorial Lone Sailor Medallion, Medallion for Service, has joined us today. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Secretary Gil Cisneros.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Admiral Thorpe, for that kind introduction on this special occasion. It's with great honor to be here on National POW MIA Recognition Day, supporting all of our service members, veterans, and their families, as we honor all of those who were held captive during their service and returned home, and pay respect to those who are still unaccounted for. On behalf of the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and the thousands of my colleagues in the Department of Defense, I want to say thank you for joining me today. Today is a moment for me unlike any other in my military and political career, representing the Pentagon at one of our nation's most important ceremonies, honoring every single American who was a prisoner of war and those who went missing in action and never returned home. I've always been proud of my family's service. I had family members who served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and I enlisted myself when I was 18 years old. But I've met many American families who did not have the chance to say goodbye to their family members who served overseas. Those family members who gave their lives in service represent the best of the American spirit. That's why in 1979, President Jimmy Carter established National POW MIA Recognition Day. This recognition is like any other in our nation because this one unites families across generations of military conflicts from World War II to the Korean War, Vietnam War, and other conflicts. This day is also a special day because it's filled with personal and painful loss. That's one of the reasons why the POW MIA flag bears a slogan, "You are not forgotten." It's vital for us to share that phrase verbally because the pain every family member or friend has for their missing loved one is difficult to deal with due to all the unknown details that factor into every service member's disappearance. We estimate that more than 80,000 American service personnel are still unaccounted for from previous conflicts. To those 80,000 unaccounted for personnel, we promise you are not forgotten. That's more than, to those 80,000 unaccounted for personnel, we promise you are not forgotten. That's more than 80,000 families seeking closure. When we say you are not forgotten, we are not just speaking of those service members who we are working to bring home. Those service members have family members seeking closure. Those family members never had the funeral for their service member that can help bring on the healing process. To those family members we say, you are not forgotten. There are more than 80,000 families struggling to find their way through an emotional process that has taken on years, if not decades, and sometimes a lifetime to heal. I'm so proud of the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, or DPAA, and what they accomplish year-round. The DPAA has hundreds of experts deployed around the world searching for Americans still unaccounted for from past conflicts. These experts work year-round doing one thing, finding those 80,000 answers to those 80,000 questions that will help those 80,000 families achieve closure by bringing home their loved one. From March 2020 to today, the DPAA has accounted for more than 300 unaccounted for Americans. When the Department of Defense says you are not forgotten, those aren't just words. We will back it up with lots of hard work too. We also remember those who sacrificed during their service, members who served time in captivity as POWs. As President Carter said in his initial proclamation, we owe them a special debt. They sacrificed so that we might enjoy the blessings of peace and liberty. And it is an honor to be here today with one of those individuals, a true hero, Commander Everett Alvarez, Jr. We all know his story of being the first pilot downed and imprisoned in Vietnam, spending 8 years and 7 months in captivity, making him the second longest held American POW in history. What you may not know is his commitment to serve and give back. He not only served as the Deputy Administrator for the Veterans Administration under President Reagan, but for 21 years, Mr. Alvarez served on the Board of Regents of the Uniformed Service University of the Health Sciences, the Department of Defense's medical school. During those 21 years, he served as board chair 2 times. Mr. Alvarez and his wife, Tammy, have been very generous with their time supporting USU, Wounded Warriors, and other causes. So thank you, sir, for your sacrifice, and thank you for your leadership. So on this day of recognition, let us remember there's still much to be done. The Department of Defense is committed to locating and identifying those that we are still missing. They will not be forgotten. So thank you for allowing me to join you today, and God bless America.
It is now my honor to add my introduction to that of Secretary Cisneros to introduce you to yet another person dedicated to national service. As Secretary Cisneros said, a national hero, the recipient of the 2012 Lone Sailor Award, and the first aviator to be captured in Vietnam, an officer of the highest distinction, a leader of leaders, and a role model for every person on the face of the earth, whether they're in the military or not. A person who has given so much for his country, including those 3,113 days of torture and missed memories, and a person who, as Secretary Cisneros said, continues to serve. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce Commander Everett Alvarez, Jr.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here today to celebrate or observe this special day. As you heard, this observation for POWs, MIAs is for those who served in all wars. World War II, Korea, Southeast Asia. And as I looked at the numbers of POWs who came back after World War II, numbers in the hundreds of thousands, and in Korea, over 7,000, and in Vietnam, 730 plus. I just want to point out that I had the distinction to serve with 2 World War II POWs in our camp in Vietnam. One was a cellmate. So this fellow was captured in World War II, and he was captured again in Vietnam. So I just didn't want you to think we were double counting here. But almost 50 years ago, a total of 662 of us that survived that prison experience in Vietnam came home. And currently, about 360 are still living. It is on occasions like today that I reflect back and think about the guys that were with us that didn't make it and didn't walk out. But looking at all of them who were held POWs, there's a lot to be said for them. If we look at those held captive during the Vietnam War, we can account for the following. 8 were Congressional Medal of Honor winners. There were 28 earned the Air Force Cross, 10 earned the Navy Cross, 4 the Distinguished Service Cross. Silver Stars, there were 593. The Legions of Merit, 558, about half of those with combat Vs. The Distinguished Flying Cross, 710. Bronze Stars, 958, most of them with combat V. And Purple Hearts, 1,249. And that is quite a distinction for those individuals. A few months ago, I had the privilege of attending a reunion of the Vietnam POWs. And as I watched these men greet and hug each other and laughing and slapping each other on the back like a bunch of grown-up kids, I couldn't help but remember them not only for their courage and their commitment to basic American values, but also for their resiliency. Because these were the men, when they were told by the camp commander that they could not communicate outside their cells, they developed a communication system of tapping on the walls in order to keep us together in an organized military structure. And no matter how hard the captors tried to stop this means of communication, they couldn't do it, because that was our instrument in keeping our faith in our country, our government, and our families and friends, and in our God. And then when the Vietnamese began their purges of torture in order to obtain propaganda, these were the fellows who resisted to the point that they felt they would not be able to recover from the torture, physically recover, and then gave as little as possible, and then got ready, got prepared for the next round of purges, because the captors always came back for more. In the end, the captors realized we were not going to easily succumb to their way, and eventually they gave up. As POWs, despite the deprivations, the torture, the suffering, we were determined to come home with our personal integrity and our reputation intact. We were determined to come home with our honor. And that was our motto: return with honor. Ladies and gentlemen, these men that I served with that demonstrated that honor is not a meaningless word, and patriotism is not an outmoded concept. Faith, loyalty, character, resilience. These are the traits that sustained us through the darkest days and gave us the strength to go forward. And when we came back and were reunited with our families and our community, there was no mistaking our sincere pride in our mission and in this nation that would not forget us. At the end of the conflict, the world watched during those long months of negotiations to bring an end to that divisive conflict. And the one issue our government would not compromise on was the safe return for a handful of prisoners. Everything else might have been bargained for, but not that. And I feel that the negotiators on the other side must have been puzzled by the idea that the fate of a few hundred individuals was of overriding importance in the whole scheme of things. That's an idea that is alien to many societies in this world. After all, what are a few hundred men, more or less, in a world of billions? Now, it is a culture in our military in the United States. We leave no one behind. And ever since the end of the Vietnam War, our government has persisted with that same philosophy, with the same vigor and purpose to account for those still missing in action. We are continually reminded everywhere by the presence of the POW MIA flags of this mission, accounting for every MIA pursued by every reasonable manner has a meaningful purpose to the families and to their memory and to our country. We have that obligation until the final chapter can be closed. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. May God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you.
Commander Alvarez and Secretary Cisneros, accompanied by Captain Dix, will now place a wreath by the lone sailor statue in honor of all Americans who are former prisoners of war, service members and civilians still unaccounted for, and their families. Guests, please rise. Advance the colors. Retire the colors. Captain Dix, sir, this concludes the ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. Thank you for joining us today. You are cordially invited to join us for a reception in honor of our guests in the Memorial Visitor Center located to my left.